During the Middle Ages, we like to think that it was just the king who was in charge of all of his people, but that's not exactly true. There were some other very influential players that were almost as important, if not more important, than the king at the time. In this lesson, we're going to ask ourselves, how did the Catholic Church influence medieval society? Today's lesson, it's our goal to learn about the role of the Church in Europe. In order to meet that goal, we first need to break it down into some more manageable parts. First, we want to explain the role of the Church in the Middle Ages. Next, we want to describe the conflicts between the Church and the European monarchs. And then finally, what we need to do is explain the causes and the effects of the Great Schism. Now, as we move through this lesson, there are some vocabulary words that you should be familiar with. First, your academic word, which is theology. And then your domain-specific words, words like excommunication, Gothic, lay investiture, sacrament, and tithe. Keep an ear out for these words as we move through this lesson together. And remember, if you ever need extra help, you can always look to your glossary. Here is your lesson question for this lesson. How did the Catholic Church influence medieval society? Well, first we want to look at the church authority in Europe and learn more about the church. And then to answer our lesson question, we want to go into what was the church's cultural influence and also what was their political influence during this time. Let's take a look at some examples of how influential the church was at this time. Well, in 800, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne Emperor of the Romans. This was a pope who was crowning a king. The church became an important force both socially and politically, especially if we look at that example where now you have a pope's authority crowning a monarch. And over the times, strong monarchs began to question the pope's authority. They were wondering if it was really right that a pope should have the authority to crown kings, and some of them took offense to that, and there would be conflict. Here's our lesson question. How did the Catholic Church influence medieval society? Well, we talked a little bit about some of the authority that the church was taking over monarchs, but now we're really going to take a look at what the church's authority was like in Europe. Even though people might be separated by class during this time, they were still united by their shared religion. The feudal system created divisions within society, but religion unified the people. That was largely in part because everyone belonged to the same religious community. At that time, the Catholic Church was really the only religious group in town. Now, everyone followed the same path to salvation as laid out by the Catholic Church, and everyone recognized the authority of the church. This was largely in part because the church actually had its own system of laws outside of those of the government. They were called canon laws. Now, the medieval church wrote its own body of law called canon law, and this included the beliefs and teachings of the church. It had rules that governed behavior. Most of those were biblical in nature or laid out by the Bible, and they were authorized by the church. Again, not the king. These were laws just solely for the church, not for the government. Now, the church even had its own systems that would enforce those church laws or those canon laws. They punished wrongdoers and they settled disputes themselves. They authorized punishments, which included their largest punishment, excommunication. Now, excommunication was where one person might be kicked out of the church and therefore not recognized by the church anymore, which was very important because they're also talking about your soul and denying you access into heaven. The local church served as a religious and also as a social center. Now, the parish priest celebrated Mass and he administered the sacraments. Sacraments are things that are religious in nature, like baptism, communion, or even the sanctity of marriage. Now, the church required every member to pay a tithe or a tax to support the church. And what a tithe was, it was actually 10% of your income. Now, this also helped to unify people because no matter if you were a wealthy noble or a lowly peasant, 10% of your income made you equal in the eyes of the church. And what these tithes went towards were things like building large cathedrals. Cathedrals served as centers of worship in cities and also large communities. They represented the glory of God. You can see this cathedral, which is still standing in Paris. This is the Notre Dame Cathedral. And you can see how grand and how large it is. They took generations to construct, and they were paid for by ordinary people through their tithes, that 10% of their income, and also donations. They introduced the Gothic style of architecture. And when I say Gothic style, if you take a look at this picture, take my marks away for a second, look over here again. The Gothic style, you can see these large spires and these ornate windows and these giant alcoves that they have. This is all part of the Gothic style. Now, these cathedrals actually would dominate the skyline. They were the biggest buildings that would be in those towns. They might be what we would think of as modern-day skyscrapers at the time. And you can see how the church, with these large buildings, that would really remind people that the church was in charge at this time, and that was their unifying force. An important aspect of the church's growth at this time was the establishment of church orders. Now, church orders were established to help strengthen the roles of the church. Here's St. Francis of Assisi, and he founded the Franciscan order, an order of friars or monks. Now, what St. Francis Assisi believed in was to go out and to help serve the poor. He believed that a monk should take a vow of poverty and that they should travel around and speak the word of God and try to convert people. They should help minister to the poor. They should clothe those that didn't have clothes and service the sick. Now, the Dominican order was dedicated to study and scholarship. There was a belief that monks should be trained and they should be highly educated so that they could interpret theology and also canon law. And women at this time joined convents. Now, normally these convents accepted women of a higher social status. And also, they allowed for their own leadership within these female convents. So this was one aspect, the church's aspect, where women in medieval society held roles of importance. Now, they believe that all these different groups believe that they should do the work of the church. A missionary would care for the sick and the poor, and they would also go around and raise money for the church's work. All of these groups took a vow of poverty for themselves as individuals, but they did raise money to take back to the church to help service the poor. Now, medieval universities, like you can see here, here's a picture of a scholar teaching to small children. The church began to support universities in the order to train clergy members. Universities were established in Paris, Bologna, and Oxford. And graduates who did not wish to enter the church, they might find a job in government. Now, remember what I said in the last slide. The reason that they felt that it was so important to have these universities and to really educate their monks was so that they would be able to interpret theology or the practices of the church and also canon law, which, remember, was the church's governing authority. These were laws that the church established outside of government or political rule. Now, here again is Thomas Aquinas, and he was an Italian noble and a Dominican priest. He wrote many influential and important works on Christian theology. Theology is encompassing the practices of the Christian church. He contributed to the growth of scholastic thought in his work Summa Theologica, which is where he combined ideas from Aristotle with the theology of the modern-day church. And what this did was it used reason, Aristotle's reason, to defend the practices of the church at this time. So you can really see how these church orders were helping to expand the influence of the church at this time. Here's your lesson question. How did the Catholic Church influence medieval society? Well, we've started to answer that question already because we've discussed some of the cultural influences that the church had at this time. Well, now let's start getting into the political influence of the church. Now, after Charlemagne, who had conquered most of this part of Europe, passed away, his empire fell apart very quickly. And the person who was standing in the wings ready to scoop it all up was Otto the First, and he was a very powerful king from Germany. He conquered all of Central Europe and most of Italy, and he was crowned Roman emperor in 962, again by a pope. He used his power of lay investiture to appoint bishops who would support him. Now let's talk about that for just a moment. Now remember that Holy Roman emperors were elected by regional rulers, dukes and other nobles. Now they could step down while they were still alive, and in order to have a son elected during their lifetime to keep their crown in the family, but they did not have the same type of hereditary rule that was seen in other kingdoms. Just because you had a son didn't mean that he was automatically going to become the emperor. Now, Otto needed support from all areas across the empire, so he used his power to appoint bishops that were going to support him. And in exchange, he granted the church very wealthy lands. Now, that process is what is known as lay investiture right here, giving the church prime real estate in exchange for favors. Now, what this was going to do was this was going to start to cause some problems because some monarchs were going to see this and they were going to disagree with that practice, and that was going to cause some conflict. And also, the fact that now that the church is getting these wealthy lands and it's growing their wealth and their power and their influence, one of the side effects of that was that there became to more corruption in the church. In addition to lay investiture, church leaders saw other signs of corruption, such as many of the clergy started abandoning their vows of poverty. They started to say, we don't want to live such a pious life anymore. We want to have some of these nice things that are suddenly coming in as well. Also, many of these priests were married with families. And what that meant was that went against their vow of chastity at that time. And many high positions in the church were being sold. And this was a practice that was known as simony. And now simony is where positions of power in the church were given to the highest bidder, not given to people based on their merit or based on their devotion to the church. And what this resulted in was even further corruption. Now, there were some reform movements that happened at this time. Reforms were instituted under the leadership of Pope Leo IX and Gregory VII. And here we can see a portrait of Gregory. Now, they said that they wanted to bring the priesthood, bring the monks, bring the church leaders back to their origins, back to these pious lifestyles, and remind them of the vows that they took. Remember at this time that priests were supposed to be in a relationship with God. They weren't supposed to be married and have outside families. Marriage for the priests was outlawed once again. Simony, that practice of giving those high positions of power to the highest bidder, that was prohibited. That was outlawed. And the church, not kings or nobles, would choose church officials. Now, what that did, when the church started to say, nope, once again, we are going to choose our church officials, not a king or a noble, how do you think the kings and nobles took that? Well, it led to conflict between the church and these powerful kings as they clashed over power. Let's take a look at an example of when the church and a monarch really came head-to-head in a power struggle. Well, remember that Pope Gregory banned the practices of lay investiture. He said, we, the church, have the authority to appoint our own church leaders, and a monarch will no longer be able to do that. Well, Henry tried to have the Pope resign after that because he said, no, the ability to appoint these positions of power within the church to my friends or to the highest bidder, that's what's guaranteeing my power as a monarch. I need to be able to do that. Well, in response, the Pope had Henry excommunicated. Remember that this was the highest punishment that the church could dole out. And what it said was it actually put Henry's soul in danger. It said you are no longer recognized by the Christian church, you are not welcome here, and your soul will no longer be allowed into heaven. Well, that was a big deal at this time. The church was such an important part of medieval life and culture. And what it forced Henry to do was go beg the Pope to allow him back into the church. Because what happened was that as soon as the Pope no longer recognized Henry's authority, all of a sudden that takes a lot of power away from Henry. And all of these other monarchs are coming in, trying to challenge him, trying to take over for him. And he was forced to fight them off after the Pope had revoked his office. So what he did was he dressed as a peasant, you can see here, and he came to submit himself to the Pope, to beg him for forgiveness, to say, I was wrong. I will never do this again. The Pope is more powerful than a monarch. I recognize that. And that was a really big deal if you think about it, because this is what that power struggle was all about. And now we have a monarch saying, I've lost, you won, the Pope is in charge. And here's Gregory right here. Now, Henry would continue to clash with the Pope throughout his reign, and in fact, it would continue over to Henry's son until Henry's son, Henry V, decided that it was time for a compromise, and he met with the Pope, and they came up with this compromise at the Concordat of Reims. And what the Pope said was, he said, I, Bishop Calixtus, do grant to the beloved son Henry that the elections of bishops and abbots of the German kingdom shall take place in thy presence. And what that basically meant was that he said, yes, the church will choose the position, but you, beloved son Henry, as the king, you can veto my choices. We'll have this compromise. So what was Henry V's response to this? He said, I, Henry, do remit to God, or give back to God, and to the holy apostles of God, Peter and Paul, and to the holy Catholic Church, all investiture through ring and staff. And what that means is Henry says, yes, I allow the church to make your own positions. You get to grant the positions of the church leaders. And what the church is saying is, yep, we're going to elect our own church leaders, but you, Henry, our king, can be there when we do it. And if you really don't like it, you have the power to veto some of our choices. When we compare and contrast something, we want to line up the similarities and the differences. The important thing to remember here is that the emperors of the Holy Roman Empire, they had to compromise, where the monarchs in France and England, they didn't. Let's take a closer look. The emperors of the Holy Roman Empire, they were elected, which shifted power to nobles. They could not build strong central governments, and they had to compromise and share their power. Now, over on the other side, the monarchs in France and England, they created strong central governments. They forged very strong national identities, and they had very strong monarchies. We can really demonstrate the strength of those monarchies if we put them on a flow chart. Here we see King Philip IV, who appointed bishops. The Pope issued a statement saying that kings must obey the Pope in order to go to heaven. Well, the French Archbishop actually took that advice, and he elected his own Pope. That you can see where they really have that strong amount of power, and they didn't have to compromise. Pope Clement V moved the papacy to Avignon, and this led to the Great Schism. In 1378, a new pope was elected, an Italian, and the French also elected their own pope. So in 1378, this Great Schism actually separated the Catholic Church. There were two camps for the Catholic Church. There was an Italian pope, and there was also a French pope. Now, there was another great schism that happened earlier in 1054, and what this did was it split the church into two parts, and it had the Eastern Orthodox Church and then also the Roman Catholic Church. If we put it on a timeline, we can see where the Catholic Church was coming to power, but then where it also started to decline, especially right around here in 1378 when the Great Schism comes along. But don't forget that when you're thinking historically, there's also other things happening during this time period. And in some cases, very large things, like in 1095 when the First Crusades are beginning.